For more now on the latest numbers from Stats SA's Labour Force Survey, Professor Andre Roux from the Stellenbosch Business School joins us now. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you very much. Good. Welcome to your viewers.
Now, youth unemployment figures remain deeply concerning. What factors have driven these changes in the latest report?
Well, you know, changes are important, but I think what's even more important is the fact that whether it be 31 or 32 or 33%, the real issue is it's been above 30% since COVID and above 25% for nigh on 20 years. And that's the really important issue here. We have a chronically high unemployment rate, not just a one-off every now and again concern. It remains chronically high. So as I say, 1 percentage point here and there doesn't make much of a difference in terms of the concern we should have. You mentioned youth unemployment. For those aged 15 to 24, actively seeking a job, the unemployment rate is in excess of 60%. That's horrible. For those aged 25 to 34, just over 40%. These are simply horrific figures and very concerning. What makes it even more concerning is when you look at the entire population, aged 15 to 24, it's round about, well, it's close to 11 million. We find that 3.8 million of those people are not at work, are not working, not employed, not in education, not in training. So close to 38%, close to 40% of people aged 15 to 24 are what we call NEETs, not employed, not in education, not in training. That is socially, politically, it is an extremely dangerous situation.
What are some of the latest trends in the unemployment rate in the latest quarterly Labour Force Survey report, and how do they compare to the previous quarters?
Well, as I was saying, it's pretty much of muchness, really. 32, 31, 33, these are horrifying numbers. What we do find in the first quarter, however, compared to the previous quarter, is that the number of people measured as unemployed has gone up by about 290,000, which means the unemployment rate, the so-called formal unemployment rate, is 32 point something percent. The expanded unemployment rate, in other words, taking into account what we call discouraged work seekers, those people aren't actively seeking a job, but nonetheless would probably like to be in employment. Then the rate goes up to 42, 43%. These are exceptionally high, amongst the highest in the world. And I think we also need to dig a bit deeper. Not just look at the overall unemployment rate, but the nuances of the unemployment rate. So if we look at those parts of the population who are particularly disadvantaged, then our Black African population unemployment rate is significantly higher than any other population group. I've already mentioned the very high youth unemployment rate. We add to that the unemployment rate, which is not surprising, for those with less than 12 years of education is much higher than those with, let's say, a post-school qualification. And then another way of looking at these things is the unemployment rate for Black women is in excess of 40%. For white men, it's barely 7%. And finally, the huge differences from province to province. So the Western Cape, for instance, has a, well, not low, but the lowest unemployment rate, whereas provinces like etc., have much higher unemployment rates. So there's no uniformity in terms of unemployment. It differs according to all kinds of criteria.
And what about AI and automation? Is that impacting the labour market?
Been around for quite some time, but going forward, it certainly could. And this brings us to another point, really. You know, we look for reasons for unemployment, and there are many. One possible reason is the economy is not growing. But even then, even if the economy were to grow, that doesn't guarantee job creation, because you can grow an economy without using labor and rather using technology, machinery. And that often happens because, ironically and paradoxically, if I do wish to expand my production as a business, there's no law that obliges me to employ labor to do so. However, if I do employ labor, then I'm subjected to a whole range of laws.
Yes.
So it's almost paradoxical. Whereas if I buy a machine or use a robot, well, I'm allowed to do so, and these machines and robots never complain, never go on strike, never demand better working conditions. I'm not saying this is the right approach, but in the real world in which we live, it is an observable way of thinking. So going forward, AI and the like, fourth IR, we could see an already huge pool of unskilled workers
Yes.
being replaced by smart robots and the like.
I wish I had more time to chat to you today. I find this conversation fascinating and obviously needing to unpack those numbers. We could go on forever. I think to draw from what we've just discussed now, those unemployment numbers are put South Africa in a desperate situation. That was Professor Andre Roux, economist at Stellenbosch Business School.